Hartman's Community Centre, Milton, Ontario, Canada. The problem obviously was where the serpents up to the task. Could they pull off such a complex routine? Many years of training serpents were envisaged, but the trainers were in for a pleasant surprise. Serpents from the tribe of histh are the more advanced form of serpents with the intelligence of cats and dogs. After much hard training, these serpents could only partially get the routines right, yet the more primitive serpents with longer and thinner bodies, non-retractable fangs, and the brains of a toad took to the routine like a fish takes to water. They didn't need any training and just needed that beat of the rhythm to get them going. As the preparations for the dance began, dragon handlers led the serpents out of their pens and set them up along the 6 circles set in grooves around the pool of histh, with its frozen statue perched in its place of honor. All the serpents chosen for the dance were of the original serpent race. The serpents of histh were allowed to finish off the scraps of flesh, blood, and offal in the feeding throes. Being serpents, both kinds were happily roaring and hissing away, and no doubt would have engaged in other activities if not restrained by their handlers. Down in the side chambers, Ida and her 5 sisters had finished perfecting the dance and were running on all fours to the ossuary in search of serpent skulls to use as masks. Down in the boneyard, they discovered that of the 2 kinds of serpent skull they found there, the more ancient skulls made a more comfortable fit. The skulls from histh serpents had higher forward slanting eyes, a more triangular appearance, and retractable fangs. These skulls were more dragon-like, more shaped like the skulls of Ida and her sisters. Unfortunately, they were not as roomy on the inside, and Ida found she couldn't slide her snout into the space between the jawbones. The more ancient serpent skulls, however, were a different story. Their venom fangs were fixed in a strike position. They had low foreheads, and the eye sockets were sideways oriented. They were also blunt-nosed and broader, not refined and delicate by any means. They are also heavy, and no normal French sky dragoness's neck could have carried their weight. Being a superior sort of dragon, however, Ida and her sisters discovered that their neck muscles were just strong enough to do the job. Thus Ida slid her snout and head into the ancient serpent skull she was holding and engaged in a little play, slashing down at her sisters with those wicked long venom fangs of the long-dead serpent. After play was done, she and her sisters bounded and leaped down the tunnel back to the ceremonial cavern, necks held high, skulls bouncing up and down on their heads. As the 6 dragonesses bound into the ceremonial cavern, the sky dragon by the sea serpent pool started tapping out the rhythm of the serpent dragon dance on a old 500-gallon oil drum. Tappity tap 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 boom. This got the attention of all the dragons, and 17 tunnels quickly emptied as the crowd of dragons gathered around the 6 serpent circles grew larger. The serpents themselves grow restless, and a few break their leashes and stray away from their handlers. Down in the feeding throes, the leader of the serpent's tribe removes his snout from the gutter guttered carcass of a cow and slithers over to the edge, intent on going where the action is. As he reaches the edge of his leash, he rears up on his hind legs, lunges his long torso forward, and snaps the restraint holding him back. He pushes his way through and heads toward the pounding beat of that dragon drummer. Ida and her sisters take their places between the circles. Ida takes a middle space between the third and fourth circle. Lies down on her belly. Not being a serpent, she can't flex her torso as easily or as much longer and sinuous serpent, but she can more easily use her more muscular legs to drag herself along the ground. She lays her head nestled in the serpent's skull flat along the ground, along with the rest of her body. Her body is tense and oily with anticipation. Having got the rhythm, the drummers cranks up the volume. The handlers release their serpent charges, and the dance begins. The serpents slide to the tap and rear up and spit out venom to the boom. Ida herself does likewise and is surprised that she had that much venom in her. She feels her heart pounding and her venom glands throbbing to the beat of the drum. The beat seems to be arousing the carnivore within her and all about her body. Dormant venom quills and stingers unfold and slide out of their resting places, dripping with venom. Out of her paws slide her talons of their own free will, and her heritage slowly awakens. After 6 complete revolutions, the serpents change their routine slightly. Up to that point, they simply spat out venom as they reared up, but now they utter lusty roars as they rear up their heads. The mood is infectious, and soon the dragon crowds are flickering out their forked tongues and bellowing out every time they leap up.